Imagine going to a foreign country and your Mustang convertible just got taken. That's exactly what Thomas felt like, as he had to travel on foot through the snow to get to Count Orlok's castle. You would have to pay me at least 7 figures and a hot bath with European models for me to take this job at this point. The story opens up with a woman who we come to learn is Ellen Hooter. Ellen is seen in a trance in the middle of the night being lured by a shadowy figure out of her bedroom. She swears herself to this entity, and then we see this absolute monster on top of her outside her home. However, Ellen wakes up and it was only a dream. Thank God. Thomas, who is Ellen's husband, is in the bedroom getting ready to go to work, which appears to be his first day on the job. Ellen doesn't want him to go, but he had to leave his distraught wife because he doesn't want to be late for work. They're newlyweds, and so Thomas wants to provide the best life for him and his wife. That's what's up. Thomas arrives to his job late, but meets with his employer, who has selected him to help an old rich count in acquiring property in their hometown within Germany. This man wishes to retire from his homeland to a more peaceful setting, and the job is going to pay both of them so much money. It's a long journey there, and Thomas would have to travel as soon as possible on horseback. Thomas tells Ellen of the new job and client, and she doesn't want him to go because of nightmares she's been having, and she feared she would never see Thomas again. Thomas sets Ellen at ease and has her stay over a friend's house with his wife and 2 young daughters. The next day, Thomas leaves to meet with Count Orlok to have him sign papers to acquire new property. Thomas's journey takes 6 weeks on horseback through the snow. I'm looking at this and I'm like, for 6 to 7 figures, sure, I'll do this. He eventually arrives at an inn filled with gypsies who mock and make fun of him. Upon meeting the innkeeper, Thomas negotiates a stay at his abode for double the price. And you know what? It worked. As he travels through the area, we as the audience see subtitles of the gypsies praying over garlic in another language to bless it. Later that night, Thomas sees the gypsies carrying torches with a naked white girl on a horse. I see this and I'm like, what the fuck are they getting ready to do with that horse? But they arrive to the grave of someone in a coffin, where they remove the cover to kill the person inside, which looks like a corpse. Now, Thomas's dumbass doesn't know what the hell is going on, so he tells them to stop, but he wakes up in his inn and finds that the gypsies are gone and his horse has been stolen. Imagine going to a foreign country and your Mustang convertible just got taken. That's exactly what Thomas felt like, as he had to travel on foot through the snow to get to Count Orlok's castle. You would have to pay me at least 7 figures and a hot bath with European models for me to take this job at this point. I don't do cold, but Thomas does. As he is traveling, Thomas arrives to this dirt road in the middle of the forest, and this horse and buggy comes to meet him. But we do not see who is driving this shit, cause it ain't solar and Elon Musk hasn't been born yet. Mind you, the gypsies at the inn told Thomas that the place he was going to was cursed. And after seeing this, I would then say to you, sir, fuck this job and then take my black ass home. Thomas arrives to Count Orlok's home and it is a big ass castle. As he enters, a shadowy figure meets him from the distance, telling him that he is late. And it's none other than Count Orlok himself. This dude is wrapped in shadows. We barely see his face. And the dude sounds like Wheezing Ed from Hey Arnold. Thomas is following the Count deeper into the castle, and the whole time I was praying that Thomas had some black ancestry in him that would kick in. Thomas goes to the dining table to hand the contract over to the Count, and the whole time, the way Orlok has been moving has been eerie. It was like he moved to the left and then teleported to the right within a second. As Orlok is looking over the paperwork, Thomas is cutting into some old ass loaf of bread, and he cuts himself, which gets this Count's attention. At this moment, Thomas knew he fucked up. There isn't enough money in this world that would make me do this job at this point. The moment I saw this nigga teleport, my ass is out the window. But Orlok wants to treat Thomas's wound, and he sits him down by the fireplace on some magical mystifying shit. And as this dusty old man approaches Thomas, Thomas wakes up. It's morning, and he is sitting in the same spot by the fireplace. My n***a. Who sleeps like this? For what, 8 hours? At this point, you need to forget the money and go home. The entire time up to this point, Ellen was having episodes in the middle of the night, which kept everybody up. It got so bad that they had to call in a doctor. Her episodes got even worse, to the point that they had to tie her ass to the bed. Now, Thomas, upon waking up, notices that he had small cuts around his chest. Those are bite marks. But no, he is roaming the castle in search for the Count. However, hours pass, and when night came, Thomas was with the Count to sign the paperwork, and the deal was finally sealed. Collect your paper and roll out tonight. And sure enough, he asked to leave. The amount of relief I felt in that one line for him was as if my prayers have been answered. Thomas Hooter apparently is 2% African, but Count Orlok tells him to sleep in the quarters to rest. But Thomas is like, that's okay, I'm good, I feel ill and I need to go home. But the Count tells him to rest, and Thomas then finds himself in a bedchamber. That's why they invented Life Alert. Thomas wakes up and is running around the entire castle for a way out, but he is locked in. He stumbles upon a room with a coffin, and in it was Count Orlok. Now what happens next is confirmation that Thomas is 2% black. He grabs a pickaxe to kill this dude, and actually tries to swing it at him. Let's go! But Orlok ends up grabbing it before the axe connects, and he is enraged. Then that 2% of black kicked in again, cause after being thrown across the room, Thomas ran out so fast that Sonic had to do a double take. Listen, take any hood nigga faced with a vampire by himself, locked in a castle with no way out, and they would do the same exact thing. Trust me. No guns, no weapons, we running. Thomas locks the door behind him where Orlok was, but then Thomas sees Orlok's shadow from outside the hall. The door swings open and Orlok is standing there besides 2 of his dogs. Thomas then finds himself in the bedchamber again, and Orlok approaches him to drink the blood from his chest. God damn, we are fucked if this nigga can control the people that he bites or some shit. I literally felt like there was no hope. Thomas wakes up and finds holes in his chest like before, and at this moment, this is almost sexual assault. The 2 dogs are there in the bedchamber, and Thomas escapes out the window and he slips and falls into the water below. Crazy. Meanwhile, Ellen's condition has gotten worse. Drugs aren't helping, and the doctor there tells Thomas's friend about another doctor he knows who has experience with alchemy and the occult. They agree to meet up with Dr. Franz, and due to a close relationship he has with his colleague, he agrees to help them. Dr. Franz meets Ellen where he has her untied and then does some tests on some exorcist kind of bull, and he concludes that what has been troubling Ellen is supernatural like a demon or Nosferatu. After seeing her bend her back out, I would agree. Around the same time, we discover that Thomas's employer is put in lockdown at a hospital because he killed 2 sheep with his own hands. And this, folks, is what happens when you ask your boss for a raise. The employer is ranting and raving about how someone is coming to bring the world to its knees. Preach. I mean, what? Now, as the story progresses, a woman can be seen picking sticks by a river, and she discovers Thomas's body. From the looks of it, she appears to be one of the gypsies. When Thomas comes to, he is at the abode of the gypsies and he tells them he can't stay because someone is after his wife. So he leaves, but it appears that the gypsies managed to break or weaken whatever hold Orlok had over his body. Thomas saddles up on a horse and heads home. And now that I think about it, wasn't this the same horse that was stolen from him earlier in the movie? As Thomas makes his journey home, a ship is traveling to Thomas's homeland and weird shit is happening on board. Crew members are getting sick with the plague, and they wonder if it has anything to do with the cargo they have on board. Back at the mainland, Thomas's employer has been tied to a chair, which had recently fell, causing the employer to plead for help. A worker comes to his aid, and the employer bites into his neck to escape, killing him in the process. Lesson 322. If your employer is willing to pay you big bucks for a job, and is super friendly, then he is most likely a bloodthirsty lunatic. Like earlier in this movie, as Thomas went on his journey, we saw him butt-ass naked on the ground drawing pictures by candlelight. So, Dr. Franz eventually learns of what happens to Thomas's employer, and he and his associates investigate the room he killed one of the hospital employees in. This led Dr. Franz and the group to look into the employer's office, and they find carvings on the floor of occult symbols under a rug, an odd-looking artifact, and a book of secrets. On the ocean, this ship with the plague has been getting on everyone's case, so bad that people are dying. The crew are then throwing their dead overboard. This is why our oceans are polluted right now. One brave sailor ventures into the cargo area to see what the deal was, and they uncover rats in a crate, right before Count Orlok dives in for the kill. The ship containing Orlok arrives and the employer takes the coffin in a little boat to his newly purchased home, which actually looks like Michael Jackson's mansion if it was abandoned and lacked magic. Ellen is in a trance and says that he is here. She rushes outside, and to her shock, Thomas comes back on his horse, tired from his travels. Now the crazy thing is that this horse practically dumps him and then walks up the block. End scene. But this is where things start to get strange. Thomas and Ellen are asleep in the guest room of Thomas's friend, and Orlok's shadow is over Thomas, and he is having a hard time breathing. Thomas's friend's wife puts her daughters to sleep, and in the hallway, she encounters Ellen, who has a hard time sleeping. And I'm like, girl, check on your husband. The two women have a sleepover in the main bedroom, since Thomas's friend is out with Dr. Franz and the rest of Mystery Inc. When the women are asleep, the Count visits Ellen, and they discuss their previous vow to each other, which Ellen said that she was tricked to do. Orlok is pissed, and said that he will give her 3 nights to proclaim herself to him again, and that this is the first night. Failure to do so will result in everyone's death. Ellen then wakes up from her dream trance and finds Thomas's friend's wife on the floor asleep covered in rats with the plague. Bro, she is all bit up. Thomas's friend comes home and finds his wife in hysteria, similar to Ellen when Thomas was away. He and Ellen have an argument and decides to send Thomas and Ellen back home. At the Hooter house, Ellen decides to spill the beans on her previous arrangement that she had with Count Orlok, which leads to an argument, which leads to Ellen acting like a demon from The Conjuring, which leads to them having sex, which leads to Ellen waking up from a trance dream state of her acting like a demon and having sex with Thomas. Trust me, it was 10 times more freaky in the theater. We had moans, ass, and I think a few nipples. But Thomas comforts her, and like that, the first scene of the movie started to make sense. Ellen had just gotten married, and the dream in the beginning was a trance from Orlok because Ellen had broken her arrangement previously with him. And it was done in a way that when you saw Orlok in the first scene, you weren't sure if it was actually him or a nightmare she was having of another monster. Robert Eggers. I see you. Now, what happens next was the most twisted shit I've seen in a while. Thomas's friend and his wife are asleep in their home, and then we see Orlok's shadow overtake the husband, who is then told by Orlok, "Don't wake up." The wife wakes up hearing her daughter screaming for help, and she is trying to wake up her husband, and he does not even budge. She rushes to the children's room, and she sees Count Orlok with the corpses of her daughter sucked dry of blood. Damn. The nigga went after the kids. And the next day we see 3 coffins going into the graveyard of a single mausoleum. And it contains Thomas's friend's wife and 2 daughters. But here's the kicker. The wife was pregnant with their unborn son. So that's 4 deaths. Let's have a quick moment of silence and then a round of applause for the screenwriting. This is everybody's low point, because now Thomas's friend is 100% committed to Thomas, Ellen, Dr. Franz, and the other doctor to defeat the supernatural. Of course, there was screaming and an argument at first, but homie was hurting. He was a rich guy who was in the shipping business, I believe, and he lost everything that was important to him. Now, the group makes a plan to kill Orlok before the 3rd night, because on the 3rd night, Orlok said he would kill Thomas if Ellen did not reject her vow to Thomas and renew her vow to Orlok. But that's when things take a turn for the worse. Thomas's friend does not reunite with the group and goes to the mausoleum. He removes the cover of the coffin of his wife and unborn son, who resides in the womb, and rests his head on her body before coughing up blood. That's when I knew he swallowed poison, because he could not stand the grief. Thomas and the team find his body, and Dr. Franz says that due to the curse of the Nosferatu, we have to burn the bodies, which they do, and I'm pretty sure that's illegal. But the group ventures off to Orlok's home that Thomas sold him, where a while back he realizes that the paperwork was altered by the employer to include the sale of his wife as well. He's selling people now? Shit. Ellen is back at the home for safety purposes. The group arrive at the worn down X mansion and find Orlok's coffin. They remove it and stab the motherfucker inside, but it wasn't Orlok. It was the employer. Clever. But then that means that Orlok is heading to Thomas's home, and Dr. Franz revealed that this was the plan Ellen wanted. Thomas rushes home while Dr. Franz burns down the entire estate. And then we see Orlok's shadow at the Hooter house, creeping up the stairs. Orlok and Ellen reunite, and she cancels her vow with Thomas and renews it with Orlok to save the town. They then strip naked, and I think they were either having sex or Orlok was just having lunch from sucking the blood from her chest. Either way, the Count was getting some of that vanilla lovin', if you know what I mean. The sun was coming up and Orlok took notice, but Ellen kept him in the bed, which was the plan the entire time. The sunlight comes through and Orlok dies on top of Ellen. This actually reminded me of a news story of a dude who died after having an orgasm. And when I think about it, this movie is technically about an old white man who doesn't like the sun and likes to nibble on the necks of women. Wait, that sounded like Joe Biden. Or rather, Joe Biden. So, Joe Biden, the movie. This is almost like that one movie Once Bitten, but told backwards. Thomas arrives home to find Orlok dead in his bed with Ellen, and Dr. Franz arrives to witness it all. That's one hell of a night. Ellen sacrificed herself to save others, but on the flip side, she did it all in her husband's bed.